Dragapult EX was just released in Japan this past weekend in their Mask of Change set, and in its opening weekend, Dragapult EX absolutely dominated city leagues across the country, booting out Charizard as the top placing deck. This means big things for us internationally when Twilight Masquerade releases in just a few weeks. It looks like Dragapult EX is going to be a top contender in our metagame, but nobody really seems to have an idea of the best way to play Dragapult EX. There are a bunch of different ways to play this powerful new card. Before I get into the various Dragapult EX builds that are seeing success in Japan, let's take a look at what Dragapult EX does. Dragapult EX is a 320 hit point Stage 2 Dragon-type Pokemon with no weakness. It's got 2 attacks. Its first attack does 70 damage for 1 colorless energy, but its second attack, Phantom Dive, does 200 damage for a Psychic and a Fire energy, and you can place up to 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon in any way you like. Charizard's dead. What do you mean Charizard's dead? This is Charizard and Dragapult in the same deck. Woo-wee! That's wild. So what we got going on here, these are city leagues. City league, that is no different than league tournaments that happen around the United States. I mean, they're kind of casual. And also keep in mind, in Japan, they do not have the Pokemon trading card game live. So this is like, Japan's way of trying out new ideas, playing, and all of that. All right, well, let's see how players are playing Dragapult, right? On the 27th, that's like day 1. So let's say, all right, the day 1 results are probably not going to be as, maybe solidified as the day 2 results. And even the day 2 results are probably not going to be as impactful as the day 3 results. So let's head over to the 29th and see what people were cooking with by day 3 of playing with the sets. It looks like Dragapult Pidgeot EX with a 1/1 Zatu line. That is interesting. We were talking on stream about how are we going to power up Dragapult EX. Before the set came out last week, some people were saying Mela, some people were saying Zatu, some people were saying Lost Box, right? And it seems like players in Japan are also still in the process of trying to figure out exactly how they want to power up this 320 hit point Pokemon. And sometimes you will want to power up Dragapult EX in one turn, which is why this list in particular is playing the Zatu, but just a 1/1 Zatu line, so that every once in a while you can chuck an extra Psychic energy onto one of your bench Pokemon, draw a couple cards. This list is also playing, check that out, Scoop Up Cyclone. I guess that tracks. Thinking about the best A-spec for a Dragapult list, this is kind of a fun choice. Scoop Up Cyclone, allowing you to put the Dragapult EX straight up into your hand. And what I like about Scoop Up Cyclone is that it brings all cards attached to Dragapult with it, unlike Turo Scenario or something like that. So you can Scoop Up Cyclone a Dragapult EX with the Psychic energy and then lay that Psychic energy right back down with Zatu's Clairvoyant Sense ability. I think that is some neat synergy. Also, Pidgeot EX does synergize well with Zatu, since Zatu only accelerates to the bench, and Pidgeot EX has free retreat. So I really like that too, because the free retreat of Pidgeot kind of answers one of the major questions about the Zatu engine, which is how are you going to pivot and accelerate only to the bench. This list is relying on Rotom V and its instant charge ability in order to kind of set up and get going with Forest Sealstone and Arven. I do like that. And then with the 4 copies of Dracloak, you can get to see extra cards every turn. So the list should be naturally pretty consistent. I really like, actually, the blends that this build has going on with Arven and Pidgeot, Rotom. This seems like a really solid place to start. So I think just kind of seeing how these lists have ended up after the first competitive weekend is pretty cool. This is kind of more of a Zatu focus build, so there is no Pidgeot EX, a 4/4/3 Dragapult, and a 2/2 Zatu line with Tatsugiri in the mix. Tatsugiri allows you to look at the top 6 cards of your deck and put a supporter card you find there into your hand. Great for fishing out those Arven early on. Seems like a lot of these lists are choosing to play Radiant Alakazam, and I talked about this last week as well. Radiant Alakazam does kind of seem like the Radiant Pokemon of choice, and the reason for that is you can do 200 damage to the active, spread 6 damage counters to the bench, and then you can move some of those damage counters off of the active to the bench if you're overhitting, right? Because 200 plus 200 is 400. So 400 is going to overhit everything for a 2-hit KO. And I like being able to kind of fix some of that math with Radiant Alakazam. Also, what Radiant Alakazam can do is if you hit the active for 200, and maybe it's a Chien-Pao EX with 220 hit points, you can hit the active for 200, spread 6 damage counters to the bench, then the following turn, move some of those damage counters you put to the bench to the Chien-Pao to knock it out, force up a new Pokemon, and then you can swing into a new Pokemon with Dragapult EX's attack. This list is playing a TM Evolution, also still has the Scoop Up Cyclone, which is pretty cool. Scoop Up Cyclone, allowing you to completely heal a Dragapult EX, can also act as a switch card in a pinch if you want to pick up your Tatsugiri after it finds a supporter card or something like that. That's cool. Honestly, you have a lot of drawing off the top with this deck, with the Dracloak's surveillance abilities, how they have it translated here, and Clairvoyant Sense. Wouldn't be unusual to be able to see an extra 6 cards off the top of the deck in a turn, which is a really big deal. This is an interesting take on the list because it is a Dragapult EX, Pidgeot EX deck, but there is no Zatu. So we see this list opting for the Mela angle, just 1 copy of Mela, which accelerates a fire energy from the discard pile to one of your Pokemon, but only if one of your Pokemon was knocked out during last turn. So this list is going to be relying largely on manually attaching these energy to the Dragapult and kind of just hoping that they stick. And since this list doesn't have any way to kind of get a bonus attachment in outside of Mela, it isn't going to play Scoop Up Cyclone, which makes sense, right? Because you're only going to want to use Scoop Up Cyclone if you can then kind of recharge a Dragapult EX instantly. This list instead is using the unfair stamp to try and get an unfair advantage maybe early on in the game. And you can always search out the unfair stamp with Arven, which I think is a really cool combination. The fact that Arven not only helps this deck set up, but also can fish out those key item cards you need when you need them, like Counter Catcher, Earthen Vessel. Earthen Vessel seems very important in these lists. Since you are playing an energy split, we've seen splits anywhere from like 3 Fire Energy, 5 Psychic. We see here 4/4. I think lists could end up as low as like 3/3. If we just kind of compare Dragapult EX to Charizard EX, Charizard EX list started with about 8 Fire Energy, then whittled down to 7, and now we're sitting around 6. So these Dragapult EX decks could certainly see their energy counts get lower and lower as lists get more and more refined. Of these few lists that I've looked at right off the rip, Rotom V does seem to be kind of a staple inclusion in these lists for its instant charge ability, and then also just combining well with Arven, since you can Arven for the Forest Seal Stone, use Rotom V as the target for the Forest Seal Stone, and then get the use out of that Star Alchemy V-Star power. Collapse Stadium, also seeming like it is a featured stadium in these lists, and this one is playing 2 copies of Temple of Sinnoh, which is really interesting. This stadium card has not seen, I guess, a ton of play in our current standard format because special energy isn't that big of a deal. I mean, Lugia V-Star is kind of the deck that plays the special energy right now. You've also got Giratina, I guess, with the jet energy, but Temple of Sinnoh just hasn't really been worth playing. But maybe Temple of Sinnoh is seeing some play to prevent the new A-Spec special energy that denies a prize when the Pokemon it is attached to gets knocked out. Temple of Sinnoh does also turn off Mist Energy, which would which would prevent Dragapult's spread damage going to the bench. So that's kind of interesting too. Maybe if in the local meta, Mist Energy is becoming a widely played card to try and protect against Dragapult EX's spread, then that makes a lot of sense. So that is very cool to see as well. And of course, the Collapse Stadium makes sense since you'll be able to remove that Rotom V from your bench after it's kind of done its job, being a target for the Forest Sealstone. Now here we've got yet another way to build Dragapult EX. This Dragapult EX list is utilizing the Lost Zone engine, putting cards in the Lost Zone, and then you can Mirage Gate to your Dragapult to accelerate a fire and a water, or a fire and a psychic energy from your deck to your Dragapult. So that's a great way to get the Dragapult powered up. This list is also playing Fresh Water Set, which is hilarious and very clearly a tech for the Dragapult's mirror, right? I guess if Dragapult decks are spreading damage all over the bench, you could use Fresh Water Set to heal damage from all of your benched Pokemon. And this list is playing, yes, just 3 Fire and 3 Psychic with 3 Jet Energy. It is playing a split of Colress and Arven, which is really unique and not something that I have really seen before. So this is fun. And it's got the TM Evolution and TM Devolution in the deck also. So you can Colress and you can Flower Selecting and get a bunch of cards into the Lost Zone, but you can also Arven. Maybe you can start off the game with Arven and, go get a couple of Dracloak into play. That does seem like a very strong way to start off the game. And this list notably is not playing any copies of Rare Candy, which is probably the most difficult thing about building a Lost Zone variant of the Dragapult deck is having to include those Rare Candies. So I do like the omission of those and the addition of the Arven. I think that that's like really fun and can really help you to set up fast. This list is also playing the Unfair Stamp A-Spec card with a copy of Enhanced Hammer. You can search that out with Arven. And it is, it's just going to be really cool to be able to use Dracloak's Surveillance ability combined with Flower Selecting. Again, this is going to allow you to see maybe 6 cards deeper into your deck during any given turn. Combine that with Colress's Experiment. It's not going to be unusual to see 10, 12 cards off the top of the deck. I guess it's going to be an odd number because you're going to get 5 plus an even number with the, you could see like 11, 13, 15 cards off the top of the deck. And that's pretty crazy, right? Between the Dracloak, the Comfey, and the Colress. So that is a very significant dig that you'll get. And then we have the Dragapult Charizard deck. And wow, how fun is that? No Pidgeot EX here. This is just Dragapult and Charizard. So 2 massive Pokemon. And, Charizard, I guess, is probably for the end game to deal a lot of damage with Burning Darkness. Also helps to accelerate an extra energy to Dragapult EX. I always thought it was ridiculous that Charizard EX accelerates 3 fire energy into play with Infernal Rain. That's just ridiculous, right? It only needs 2 to attack. Why does Infernal Rain accelerate 3? Well, I know why Infernal Rain accelerates 3. It's because you want to accelerate 2 to Charizard EX and 1 to your buddy Dragapult. Dragapult EX. Because why the heck not, right? So Charizard EX can be its own deck. Charizard EX can be Dragapult EX's best friend. And this list seems to be doing that. It's kind of having the best of both worlds. If you want to be able to do 300, 330 damage at the end of the game, Charizard EX can do that. If you want to use Scoop Up Cyclone and reuse your Charizard EX, this list can do that, which is super crazy. It's got just 5 Fire Energy with the 2 Rod and 2 copies of Earthen Vessel. So not a lot of energy. You are going to have to be careful with your energy attachments in a list like this, but with the 2 copies of Rod, you'll probably be okay. And honestly, the combination of Dragapult and Charizard does seem pretty gnarly. This list is, of course, missing the consistency of Pidgeot EX. And that is not to be understated. I mean, it is certainly possible to get yourself in a situation where your hand's not quite right. And you wish that you had Pidgeot EX's quick search to just go get whatever you want. And at the end of the game, your opponent's Ionos will hurt a lot. Because look at this deck. This deck is not playing any research or anything like that. So at the end of the game, when you get Iono, your most powerful draw card is also Iono. And that sketches me out. So as cool as the combination of of Dragapult to Charizard it does kind of worry me that there's no kind of failsafe like Bibarel or Pidgeot. However, you do have to keep in mind, Dracloak does have that surveillance ability. So if you've got a couple of Dracloak set up, you are going to be able to get a couple of extra cards into your hand. But it still doesn't make your hand go from like 1 to 5 like Bibarel does, right? And we've seen how impactful Bibarel has been in these Charizard lists alongside Pidgeot to make sure that you can always draw out of those late game Ionos. Thank you, Solid RK. Thank you, Oh Hey Trace, for those subs. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. It is wild to me how much play Scoop Up Cyclone is seeing. It was a spec that I kind of reviewed as not being one of the most impressive specs to me, but a lot of these early lists out of Japan are playing the Scoop Up Cyclone. I wonder if that is going to be something that stays. If you think about Scoop Up Cyclone's kind of utility in these lists, a lot of Charizard Pidgeot lists were playing multiple copies of Turo Scenario, but there was always the caveat of it's not always the best time to play Turo Scenario. And, having to discard the energy off of Turo Scenario is always kind of brutal as well. But Scoop Up Cyclone, you don't have to be you don't have to have the perfect hand to be able to play Scoop Up Cyclone. You can kind of just play Scoop Up Cyclone on a whim. If you've got an Arven, which you're going to be playing like every other turn of the game to go get the cards that you need in order to set up. If you have an Arven, you could just Arven for the Scoop Up Cyclone and then boom, pick your guy up, lay him back down, and you're cooking. So I think that Scoop Up Cyclone does make a lot of sense with these really big 330, 320 hit point stage 2 Pokemon that are not getting 2 hit KO'd. That are not getting 1 hit KO'd, excuse me. And it also makes sense in a very Dragapult heavy meta game to play the Scoop Up Cyclone, since you're going to be able to heal Pokemon that Dragapult damages and put them back down. So it does kind of operate as that heal card in a pinch too. We are seeing a lot of Enhanced Hammer. Some of these lists playing Lance, which is funny, but I guess with Lumineon V being able to Lance and go set up a couple of Dracloak or a Dragapult EX is pretty cool. Here's another Dragapult EX list. This Dragapult deck is just Dragapult, nothing else, with Mela and the new Neo Upper Energy Special Energy. And this card seems like it's perfectly crafted for the Dragapult EX deck, right? It provides 2 rainbow energy when it's attached to a stage 2. So it does power up Dragapult EX with just 1 energy attachment, which is something that Dragapult EX decks will want to do. But we have seen quite a few of these Dragapult EX decks playing Enhanced Hammer, which really hurts. If you're relying on that Neo Upper energy to fulfill the attack cost for Dragapult EX, Enhanced Hammer can just instantly remove that. Again, this Dragapult EX deck is just relying on Dragapult to draw, the 1 copy of Mela to accelerate an extra fire energy throughout the game, Tatsugiri, and Rescue Board. That's a combination that we have seen in quite a few of these lists as well. And this seems like, yep, another fine way to play Dragapult. 2 copies of Lance means that they're really focusing on getting those Dracloak out into play early and flooding the board with powerful Dragapult EX. Yo, Dragapult Squawkabilly? 2 Squawkabilly? Okay. This is kind of a radical way to play Dragapult EX. It looks like a Dragapult Squawkabilly deck, and I would say that maybe Squawkabilly is just here to use its Squawk and Seize ability, but since there are 2 copies of Squawkabilly in this deck, I have to imagine that Squawkabilly is probably here for its Motivate attack, which allows you to attach 2 basic energy from your discard pile to your bench Pokemon. So maybe they are kicking off the game with a Motivates and then letting Squawkabilly EX get knocked out and then Ionoing the opponent to low and kind of playing the rest of the game with the energy that they accelerated into play with Squawkabilly EX. I do like the inclusion of Iron Bundle in some of these lists. The reason why Iron Bundle is so good is because if you smack into something with Dragapult EX's Phantom Dive for 200, say a Pokemon that has 220 hit points, then you don't want to hit that Pokemon with 20 HP remaining again for 200 damage. That is a gross misuse of your damage counters. So you would rather push that Pokemon to the bench with Iron Bundle's Hyper Blower ability and then finish that Pokemon off with the 6 damage counters that you're placing. So the Iron Bundle does make a lot of sense. In the same way that Radiant Alakazam makes a lot of sense, they kind of fulfill a similar thing. But Iron Bundle can help you deal with a Pokemon even as big as maybe Blood Moon Ursaluna. Say you hit a Blood Moon Ursaluna for 200 damage, and then you want to finish it off with 6 damage counters placed. You can bundle it to the bench and then perfectly finish it off. That's not something that Radiant Alakazam is going to be able to do, since Radiant Alakazam's Painful Spoons ability only moves 2 damage counters at a time. Dragapult EX Armarouge. This is kind of fun. The idea of this deck is to accelerate fire energy onto your benched Armarouge with Magma Basin, and then use Armarouge's Fire Off ability to move that extra fire energy to your active Dragapult EX. And with that little combo you've got, you can get Dragapult EX powered up in just 1 turn, which is pretty cool. And this list is the first list we've seen that is playing the Secret Box Ace-Spec. In a combo-heavy deck like this, that makes sense, especially since the Secret Box allows you to discard fire energy and then search for the Magma Basin that you will want to accelerate that fire energy into play. So that's kind of a cool combo there that I really like. This list has got a Klefki, which can turn off abilities if they throw that in the active, and the Monkey Dory. And in my set review, I talked about how bad I think this card is, but I guess it makes sense here, right? If you've got extra energy kind of flowing into play with Magma Basin, then you can afford maybe at some point in the game to attach a luminous energy to your Monkey Dory. And then once you have that luminous energy on the Monkey Dory, you unlock its ability, which allows you to move up to 3 damage counters from one of your Pokemon to one of your opponent's Pokemon. So In the mirror, that's kind of crazy because you can use it to heal off damage that your opponent's Dragapult has placed on your Pokemon. And all you have to do is put a Luminous Energy on it, and you can combine that Monkey Dory with Radiant Alakazam to effectively manipulate 5 extra damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon's, on your opponent's Pokemon in a turn, which is pretty crazy. You can also combo the Monkey Dory with the damage counters you place on your own Pokemon with Magma Basin. And that's kind of crazy, right? Because you're going to be damaging your own bench Pokemon, and then you can use the Monkey Dory to move those over. So even if you're not playing against a deck that spreads damage counters on your own bench, you can eventually get damage counters to move onto your opponent's Pokemon with Monkey Dory. This is a very fun and cool list. As you can see, it's only playing 1 copy of Rare Candy, playing both TM Evolution and TM Devolution. I am less convinced of the potency of a very, call this kind of a wombo combo kind of deck than I am of maybe some of the other more streamlined Dragapult decks, but this is certainly one way to get an extra fire energy into play that I admittedly had not considered before. That about wraps it up for Dragapult EX. Thank you so much for watching the video. Make sure to let me know in the comments below what you think the best way to play Dragapult EX will end up being. If you like this video, make sure to also check out the Twitch stream, twitch.tv/TrickyJim, where I stream live Pokemon trading card game content every single weekday. Y'all take it easy and have a good one. See ya.